Welcome back. On today's video, we're going to compare Claude.ai to chat.qwen.ai. Now, Qwen is something that I had not seen before. It's apparently a AI developed by Alibaba out of China, and it's got a unique approach. So let's jump right in. Now, if you've watched our previous video about Claude versus Manus, you'll know that we started with this and Manus went a different direction, so Claude got the nod. But what we're going to do is compare Claude versus chat.qwen. So the first question is, explain why groceries, rent, and insurance feel more expensive than wages, as if you're explaining it to someone who just left the grocery store angry. Include real economic factors and cite sources. Now, we're not looking for necessarily the content, or we're not comparing the information that it puts out. What we're looking for is, does this give us a conversational, semi-accurate model that we can rely on, that we can understand, and it's actionable. So I'm going to hit send on Qwen over here, and we're going to go through what Claude came up with. So Claude comes up, it starts out conversational. I get it, you're standing there looking at a receipt, doing mental math on what you just spent. So that's good. It's relating, it's understanding. The core problem, it's giving us some actionable information on grocery prices have jumped 25 to 28%, while wages have only gone up 20 to 22%, and that creates a gap. Insurance is its own nightmare. It talks about how insurance has gone up and even why that home ownership has gone up, Florida, California, Texas. And of course, homeownership insurance does affect somewhat the renter insurance because landlords have insurance, and if those costs go up, as well as property taxes, which is something that is not getting discussed a lot, then that does affect the renter's costs. Paychecks increase maybe 3 to 5%. So it's good, it's giving us actionable information. There's a lag effect. Even when inflation cools, prices don't go back down. Now that's interesting because in some markets that's true. In other markets, in a lot of markets, actually rents are going backwards because of a lot of new inventory that has come on the market. So it's not taking that into account. But that's something that would not make us feel any better given the current situation. It's talking about the housing trap and how NIMBYism is preventing the supply. Okay, interesting. And government inflation numbers have talked about, they measure all goods and services, but we don't buy the average. And that's true because we see and we hear that inflation is coming down, but we're not seeing it necessarily in rent or cost of goods. So interesting, it is giving us some good actionable information, or good information that we can understand what's happening. Let's come over and look at Qwen. What did it come up with? Actually, it's coming up with a very similar even text. The way it's presenting it is talking about groceries and rent. And what's interesting is it's giving us sources, and this is something that Perplexity is good at too when you're looking at Perplexity, is it gives us sources of where this information is coming from, and it's coming from LinkedIn in this instance. You can see though, however, it is in Chinese, so I'm not sure. We'd have to dig deeper to see if the data is actually coming from the United States or whatever market you happen to be in. This one, though, does Boston Fed. It goes to Boston Fed and pulls that information. Shelter makes 36% of the inflation. Okay, so this is giving us good actionable information. It is talking about wages have grown just unevenly. Good. It's still coming up with similar information. Why it feels worse than the numbers show because of frequency bias. That's something that I haven't seen any of the other AIs come up with. Interesting. You go to the grocery store more frequently, so that is something that's more prevalent on your mind than some of the other things like eggs that have gone down. You're seeing your grocery bill go up. Very interesting. Essential versus discretionary, bottom line, you're not imagining it. So it does come up with good actionable information. I would say that both of these are pretty even, with an interesting piece, with interesting insight coming over here from Qwen that has not been brought up by some of the other AIs. So let's go into the next one. It says, I work in a mid-sized company and leadership keeps saying we're being cautious based on the current economic condition. What are 3 early warning signs layoffs may be coming, and 3 signs that I'm probably safe? A lot of people unfortunately have faced this. So let's see how it comes up with the information. So Qwen is actually coming out in the lead as far as what it's doing. It looks like, nope, it looks like we've come back over here to Claude. And Claude is coming up with the information talking about 3 warning signs. Okay, so the translation of corporate speak, being cautious, could mean anything from we're fine just watching our pennies to we're circling the wagons before cuts. That's good. 1.17 million job cuts have been announced in 2025, up 54%. So good actionable information. Qwen over here is still thinking. 3 signs, hiring freezes, absolutely. If you see hiring freezes, restructuring announcements, those are signs that something is coming, that the company is looking at restructuring to save money, or at least to get closer to revenue. Sudden budget cuts or project cancellation. Yep, if you see that, then that's something you need to watch out for. Leadership changes or decreased transparency. Yes, unfortunately, some leaders in companies are not very good at leading, or they just don't know what to say, and they say that or they'll come back in and say, okay, we've got a problem. All right, after a quick delay to sign up for Qwen, it gets you in there with the searches, and then you have to sign up, which is okay. It doesn't actually ask really any personal information. So coming back to the Claude output, 3 signs of last minute becoming hire freezes, restructured. We've already gone over that. Sudden budget cuts, cancellations, leadership changes, decreased transparency. Very true. 3 signs you're probably safe. Your role is revenue generating or mission critical. Very true. This is actionable information. If you're not in that type of a position, you can get yourself hopefully into that kind of a position where you're in sales, client-facing, revenue operations, something where you're generating money for the company. You have strong relationships and visibility. This only goes so far. With a lot of companies, when you get into that situation, leadership changes. And unfortunately, as leadership changes, the relationships that you may have built go away. Visibility can be very important if you're the face of the company, if you're a high-profile salesperson and your absence would be noticed. That could be very instrumental in keeping you safe. And your company is actively investing in your area. Absolutely. What you should do, don't panic. Good. This is giving us actionable information, something that you can do. Update your resume now, strengthen your network. And of course, this, you've heard me say this in other videos, your network becomes very, very important if you're changing jobs. Keep LinkedIn active. And being cautious can genuinely mean your company is just being prudent. So it's, again, saying the sky's not necessarily falling, but keep an eye on all of these things. Let's go over to Qwen and see what it came up with. Global economy is showing some resilience with modest growth. That's good. It's actually showing, it's not just talking about what we asked, it's saying, hey, here's a full contextual piece. And there's some resilience, 2.7% projected growth for 2026, but corporate caution is widespread. So this is not translating the information as we ask, but it's giving us context. So a mixed bag there. 3 early warning sign, hiring freezes with quiet chaos signals. That's an interesting way to put it, and very true. If your company is frozen hiring and you notice canceled projects, all we're saying be that we're being cautious. It trends towards smaller, frequent layoffs, death by 1,000 cuts, meaning the company may test the waters with minor cuts. Interesting, okay. Not necessarily very helpful, but interesting. Department-specific metrics deteriorating, leadership behavioral shifts. Okay, so it's giving us some information. I'm going to say actually Claude comes up with better information on that. 3 signs that you're relatively safe, not guaranteed. You're in a revenue-generating role. Of course, we're seeing consistency there. Your department has recent budget approval and expansion plans. Oh, that would be a good one. If you're getting more budget while everyone else is getting less, that means that they're investing in you or your area. You possess irreplaceable institutional knowledge of client relationships. Unfortunately, with large companies, that does not necessarily mean anything. I've seen that happen a number of times recently where someone gets laid off and they've got the legacy knowledge and the company just scrambles to make up for it. So interesting information, reality check, no positions 100% secure. The we're being cautious language also often reflects genuine uncertainty, not necessarily imminent layoffs. Okay, I would say in this instance that Claude gets the nod because it does actually give us better actionable information. So let's jump into the next test. This one is, my manager says there's no budget for raises, but the company just posted record profits. List realistic explanation for this and 3 smart responses that won't get me fired. Again, what we're looking for is actionable information, something that tells us, okay, what could they be meaning, but also what can I do? What will help me get that new position or the raise or something that I'm looking for without necessarily getting me fired? So we can see response time again. Claude is definitely taking the lead. Qwen is running slower. It looks like there are different versions of Qwen over here that we could run with, but this is the one that it gave us. So yes, yeah, that's infuriating. You're not crazy, the disconnected real. Let me give you an honest explanation. So it's talking about, so it gives us the sympathy factor that we're looking for, but then it's talking about why. Now, what's unique here that I hadn't noticed before, and it actually does, is it does give us some links. Anyway, Fortune 500 companies posted a record profit, so it's talking about what's potentially happening. When profits exceed expectations, the extra money typically goes to shareholders, executive bonuses, debt reduction strategies, not retroactively back into salary budgets. That's true. What it's not necessarily talking about here, it does a little bit debt reduction, strategic investments. There may be loans that are out there or other pieces that the company has to pay back, obligations that it signed on for before. Labor costs are sticky, and leadership treats that differently than a one-time windfall. And what that's talking about is raises are ongoing, but bonuses are not. There's discretionary bonuses. Leadership's looking to do future uncertainty, so a lot of times they want to protect profits for future use so that they have ongoing capital to use as opposed to giving it all out and then going broke the next year. There's absolutely truth to that. Wage growth has been cooling while inflation remains elevated. So that could be looking at the wages are not necessarily going up across the board, but they're worried about costs going up as they go forward. They're essentially saying we already paid you more during the inflation spikes. We're not going to give you more now that inflation's cooling. That's a very infuriating way to present the information, although it's not entirely inaccurate. 3 smart responses that won't get you fired. Let's see how this does. Reframe it as a retention and market value consideration. Okay, understand budget constraints. I'd like to discuss my compensation relative to current market rates, the role that I've experienced. I've researched comparable positions and there's a gap. This is an interesting approach. You're basically saying you have to pay me more to keep me here. It's an adversarial approach, and it doesn't give your company necessarily an opportunity to work with you in the future. Unique. Ask for profit sharing or performance-based bonuses. What to say? Given the company's strong performance, I want to ask you if there are opportunities for profit sharing, performance-based. Okay, so that's a good one, because then you're looking at how do we tie this to compensation? Let's give each other something that we can both work on. I like that. Document your impact. Ask for a title change or expanded responsibilities. I've been thinking my career trajectory here over the past year. I've done XYZ if there's no budget. So this one's good because now you're talking about career growth, adding value to the company, which allows them to pay you more. Let's look over here and see what Qwen came up with. All right, so the disconnect between record profits and no budget for raises is unfortunately common. There are both legitimate reasons and problematic patterns behind it. Legitimate reasons: budget timing mismatch. Compensation budgets are set. That's very true. Record profits may not impact the next year's budget. Interesting. Okay. Non-recurring profits come and go, where salary increases remain. Very true. Divisional disparity: your department may be underperforming as the company posted overall profits and strong numbers. That's a good one that has not been brought up very well in a lot of the searches that we've done, these comparisons that we've done. Sometimes departments are underperforming, not doing as well as the overall company, and they're not able to allocate increased budgets to those individuals. Problematic but common pattern: shareholder first priority. Yep, we've talked about that before. Compensation philosophy shift: 50% companies give every worker a raise, roughly half limited their increase to 50% or fewer, moving towards performance-based rather than across-the-board raises. So that would be good actionable information to have if your company if your company tells you that you are not performing as well, or they're giving raises to only people who are. That could be a legitimate reason. Executive versus broad workforce divergence. Yeah, we're hearing about that more and more, where the executives get more, but the rest of the employees don't. So 3 career safe responses: reframe around value retention, understand budgets. Given the strong performance this year, I'd appreciate guidance on what metrics would position me for a mid-cycle adjustment. This is, I think, much better than over here, where it's still talking about retention, but it's not giving them an ultimatum of, hey, I've seen these other places, I'm leaving if you don't pay me more. This is talking about, I've seen these positions other places. How do we structure my compensation to add value to the company so that we can both profit? That is it's much less adversarial and much more beneficial to the parties. Request non-salary value with clear ROI. If base salaries are not feasible, can we talk alternatives for my continued contribution, such as a one-time retention bonus? That may work. Because again, it's not an ongoing expense if they really do value you, but it's something where they're able to pay once and then not have to show it in the future. You could pair that also with the next piece, and it looks like it's going into that here. Number 3, I'd like to align expectations with the next review cycle. Can we set 2 to 3 specific measurable goals that, if achieved, will be a strong case for compensation adjustment? That's very good. A critical reality check: never threaten to quit the conversation unless you have an offer in hand. Absolutely, especially in today's economy. In the last few years, the economy was hot, the job market was hot, and you could just leave and go find another job. In today's world, finding a new job is much, much harder. And unless you have something in line, ready to go to, you don't want to make that quit or that threat, because they may take you up on it. Track your market value quarterly, not just during review cycles, if your compensation falls. So again, make sure you're watching other companies and watch for pattern recognition. I would say in this instance, Qwen actually comes up much stronger with an actionable information that's not going to get you in trouble. So let's move on to the next one. This one is translate this corporate message into plain English without being rude. And it goes, due to macroeconomic headwinds, we're realigning resources to drive long-term efficiency. So again, we want to look for actionable information. Is this something that we can understand as it puts out the information? And here we go. Both of them are actually coming up with it very quickly. Qwen took the lead on this one. Translation, the economy is uncertain, so we're cutting costs now to protect profits later. I would say that's good. And then it gives us what it actually means. It talks about they're moving people around, usually means layoffs, hiring freezes, budget cuts. This is early stage damage control. They're preparing you for bad news, but framing it as strategic. Not necessarily, but actually it could be getting there. And unfortunately, I've been through that cycle several times. What you should do is start paying attention to who's getting pulled into strategic planning meetings, which departments are suddenly being asked to justify their headcount, update your resume, make yourself visible in high priority projects. Absolutely. If you know your manager's position, that's completely separate advice. That's good. If your manager is in favor with the company or out of favor, that would make sense to look at how you're going to address that. Here's another one. Let's see. We're adjusting our priorities, reallocating people and budgets to focus on the most important work, given the current economic uncertainty. I think both of these come up very fine. Why this works: macroeconomic headwinds. Economic uncertainty avoids vague doom speak while acknowledging real conditions, realigning resources, adjusting priorities, reallocating people, driving long-term efficiencies. I would say this is good information. It's very understandable the way they put it out, but Claude gets the tip of the hat on this one. They take the lead on that because it's more understandable and more actionable. Prompt number 5. I make $70,000 a year. Rent keeps going up, and every article tells me to just invest more. Create a realistic monthly budget that doesn't assume I stop eating or cancel my entire life. Location, Denver, Colorado. So what we're looking for is, again, actionable information. Does it take into account the local market? Does it take into account realistic expectations and budgets? Is this going to give us something that we're able to put a budget around and survive? So Claude is coming out strong with a actionable budget. Let's do this. 70,000 Denver makes you're taking home roughly $4,375 per month. So if we look at $70,000 per year divided by 12, you'll see that's $5,833. The reason it's coming up with a $4,375, however, is because of federal, state taxes, and FICA, assuming your single standard deduction, no 401k yet. Here's a budget that doesn't treat you like a monk. Non-negotiables: rent, $1,600, 36.5% of your take-home. Denver's average rent is $1,889, though older apartments should average for $1,700. This is very cool because it's actually looking at the overall market, saying, well, the average rent is this. If you find an older apartment, you're going to be here, $1,700 a month. You're not getting a luxury building, but you can find a solid. So it's saying these are the different ranges. Can you get there based on this information? It looks like you could. As I'm not totally familiar with the Denver market, but the rents that I've looked at, you can absolutely find rents for something in that range, the $1,500 to $1,700 range. Reality check is 36% is higher than the 30% rule, but the rule was rent was cheaper. 36% I think is fine as long as you've got your other budget in place. Utilities, $150 a month. Renter's insurance. It's actually coming up with good information here. Groceries, $100 a week. Phone, $50 plans, and it's coming up with actual wireless carriers that you can find with these rates. Health insurance, $0 to $200. If your employer covers it, that's great. If not, you're going to be stuck there. Subtotal, and now it's giving you different expenses that you're able to use. Eating out, $200 a week. Entertainment, $150. Personal. This is great information, and it looks like it's actually coming up with all the items that would be recommended. $200 for an emergency fund, debt payments, they may be later, and then total spent, including retirement, $3,300 to $3,700, with between $580 and $980 a month left. I would say this is a great strategy, assuming the information's accurate and if the rents are accurate. I do see that the health insurance could end up being a little bit higher, but this is giving you actionable information that you're able to do. Let's look over here at Qwen, see what it comes up with. And let's see, realistic budget in $70,000 in Denver, no virtue signaling, no skip the avocado nonsense. So it's trying to be more conversational, a little bit of humor thrown in there. $70,000 after taxes, you're at $4,430, and Claude came up with $4,375. So pretty darn close. Budget, rent $1,750. Denver's average rent $16,000 to $2,000. $1,750 gets you a modest apartment. Okay, so it's taken into account the actionable information. Utilities and internet $225. Groceries $375. That's a little bit lower. Transportation, health insurance, phone, renter's insurance, all the way down. Discretionary emergency buffer 4,075, remainder 355. So it's looking at this at similar things, basic life, food flux. There's a lot of information here. At these income in Denver, you're not failing, you're in the statistical middle. Denver requires 67.5 to afford medium rent. 355 is a realistic starting point before any investing, not $500 a month like generic advice claims. So, you know, it's giving us good information. It's giving us some advice like skip the Starbucks. Well, this is something we hear from everyone. You cook every meal, get a roommate, side hustle. Bottom line, you can invest $200 a month without canceling life, but only after confirming your employer offer, blah, 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 blah. So good information. I would say that this is something that is actionable. I would say that the presentation of Claude is better, and Claude's budget seems to be in line. Both of them seem to be in line, but I like the presentation better over here on Claude. It even gives an additional strategy here, so we'll give the tip of the hat to Claude as well. But Qwen did come up with a surprisingly good strategy. Now, prompt number 6, which would be our bonus prompt, explain why the stock market is doing fine while everyone I know feels broke. One paragraph, no MBA language. So again, actionable information. Can we do something with this? And what we're looking for is something that makes sense out of it, because you do. Every time you turn on the media, it talks about how the stock market's doing great, and everyone that you talk to is saying, well, we don't feel the same. So the stock market's talking how much profit big companies are making and what investors think they'll make in the future, not whether regular people can afford groceries. When companies post record earnings, so good information. Again, 58% of Americans own stock, while the wealthiest 10% own roughly 87% of all stocks. So the wealthy people feel it disproportionate. How's it doing over here on Qwen? The stock market isn't a measure of how regular people are doing. Good. It's a scoreboard for big companies and wealthy investors. 89% of stocks are owned by the top 10%. We're within 2% here on the numbers that it's saying. Meanwhile, wages for most workers have barely kept up with inflation. So it's got similar information. I'm going to say these are both about even. Overall, however, I'm going to say that Claude wins the comparison simply because it seems to be more actionable, and it's something that people would be able to do and understand better. I'm very impressed though with Qwen. It's again, coming out of the Chinese company Alibaba. It's got good information, and we didn't really run up into any really bandwidth limitations. Claude did come up with information faster. However, Qwen's information was good. So out of the two, I would tip my hat to Claude. I would say that gets the win, but Qwen did come in a very close second. So I hope this information has been helpful. If it has, please give us a like down below. If you'd like to see more information like this, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you know someone this may help, please do share. Thanks for being here. We'll see you on the next one.